everybody, and welcome to the Heart of CX. I'm Max Ball, Director of Product Marketing here at Ring Central, and this is round 3 of what we like to call our Masterclass on deployment and personalized data-driven contact center with Wesley Greina and Scott Shanehair from HCM. And Joanna, I'm just going to say hi to you and let you kind of start the conversation here.
All right. Thanks, Max. And so excited that we get to continue the conversation today. So, today's topic, we're going to talk about delivering a personal customer experience. And so, I thought we'd start with a heavy question first. You're welcome, Scott and Wesley. Um, let's talk about delivering that personal customer experience and what your deployment and rollout look like. I mean, how do you not boil the ocean when you're introducing a personalized experience?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thanks for having us back. I think last episode I looked like I was at the beach in the ocean, and this time I've come back to my normal home office. So
And no more spring break.
yeah, spring break over, I guess. So I guess it's back to the real world. But Joanna, I think organizations when we talk about implementing a rollout of all of this, right? So if you're moving from an antiquated piece of technology to a more advanced piece of technology, especially a cloud-based contact center, change management is really, really important on how do you want to be successful in that. And there's a lot of different people involved. There's a lot of different stakeholders, involved in a rollout like this. So, I joke a little bit and whatnot about the stair step approach of how I think as successful rollouts of these can go is don't try to take on so much at once that you're going to your point, boil the ocean and have a bigger mess on your hands at the end of the day. But, get yourself to a point where you've kind of moved from the antiquated piece of technology, get yourself situated into the new world, right? But I think you have to be mindful a little bit, and Max was just talking about this prior to our call. Is how do you measure getting back to that baseline from antiquated to the new, but then not limiting yourself on what all the new capabilities that your world's just been opened up to, right? I think that was something along those lines, Max, and you don't want to do it. So taking a stair step approach on that implementation is critical, and small changes, right, at a time. You got to bring the people along with you in that process internally in your organization to ultimately get to, you take 25 small change steps. Next thing you know, you've reached massive change in your organization. So I think that philosophy is what works, and just kind of go from there at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think change management is such a large, rich topic. And so as you took your team along for the journey, what worked well and what didn't work so well? What do you wish you knew at the beginning of this?
So, geez, what worked well and what didn't work well. So the things that worked well were things that I would say enhanced our frontline working, our staff, that made their day to day easier. So if there was for example, having visibility into dashboards of real live events that were occurring in our contact center, that's a simple change for us as an organization, right? So we went from wall boards that I think you see in a lot of traditional contact centers. And you have the placement of the wall boards might be wonky, and they might be, you got to turn your head to look at them, or who knows, right? Or you can't see them or whatnot. To then having a dashboard that was live and interactive right on your computer screen for a frontline worker, that small change for us is an example of enhancing the frontline worker, that wasn't earth shattering to them, right, in the sense of adoption, But it was a nice change. So I think the small things that enhance the workflow and their day to day was really a successful things. Things that didn't work well for us. Is I think implementing change in our call flows that we weren't exactly ready for. So, for example, um, callback and queue, love it.
Mhm.
I think that's a powerful tool to bring to light for that bring that flexibility to people and that personalization aspect and customer service aspect. You know, but how we as an organization, right, trained our staff to understand what that callback and queue is going to look like and feel like from a frontline worker standpoint. We didn't do a very good job at that right out of the gate. We probably failed at that early on. What was that callback experience like? Ringing back to an agent, knowing, is this a callback and queue call? Is this not? So I think just being, at the end of the day, understanding
Mm.
what change looks like to the frontline staff and what that looks and feels like for them, and just being mindful of it, of what you're going to adopt and not adopt early on, is this probably my biggest lessons learned in our change management of adopting a new phone solution. So
Yeah, it kind of strikes me as you're saying that. I mean, we always talk about your customers being your customers and your agents being important to them. But in this case, your agents were your customers. They're the ones that have to buy off on this. And if it's not working for them, it's not going to go anywhere.
yeah, absolutely. You got it. They have to be in the forefront of your mind on any decision that you're making in relation to adoption of a new telephony application or contact center. What does that mean for them? Sit in their shoes, look through their lens. What does that workflow look like? And take all that into perspective as you're making decisions.
That makes sense. So how did you start? What was the first step?
The first step in adoption or rollout of a
Well, yeah, the first step in rollout, really, kind of going back to the bigger. So you guys, well, actually, you know what? Let's take a step back for a moment. What were you rolling out when you said, we're rolling out a new customer experience, we're moving to the cloud, we're doing new technology? What, you know, that at the top of that staircase, what? Not that you'll ever reach the top, but what was it that the staircase was leading to?
yes,
I
it
mean,
was. Go
Scott
ahead.
and I think like the top of the staircase is leading to, kind of a company that's driven more so uh, by technology for the people, like Scott said. I like in kind of what you indicated, Max, on our frontline team, they're kind of our customers, where the stakeholders from a technology standpoint. And that top of the staircase is the modernization of engagement. And Scott and I are trying to get to a point where we can offer a plethora of options for our customers to engage their customers, or whom patients is generally who that is going to be. And one of the things that was a big limitation for us was the antiquated technology we were coming from was really difficult. We only had, what, Scott, one, two people who could even touch it and
Mm,
customize it.
mhm.
And getting to a point where we can empower more of our team members to learn a technology. And I think that was a really big piece of this was, you can roll something out, but if it's all dependent on Scott and I, and we're sitting on podcasts all day, I mean, that's not really going to work really well. So, we we've got to a point though where we went from like one or two people and maybe some like like more or less IT support to a whole team across our workforce that understands a technology and a platform. And once you have that within a contact center, you can build from it. And those stairs, they're going to keep increasing. And wherever we're going, I don't know how many stories or flights. I mean, I guess it's endless for Scott and I, but that's okay. It really makes us really understand that, yeah, this might be phased, but each phase brings something new. And I think he said, like, and it's an enhancement. And sometimes it's going to be enhancement for the patients that we're serving and our clients, and other times it will be for our frontline team. And sometimes it's going to be quality of life for people like Scott and I, and we can actually like sleep at night / not have to worry about some things.
I love that. I love that. So let's talk about your front line. And we've talked about your front line previously as well and talked about agent empowerment. So, why is that important, or how does that translate into the execution of personalization?
I'll let Scott go first on this one. I think we both have a different perspective on it.
Yeah. So agent empowerment, it just goes back to this whole notion that we have to have people that are in a situation that they feel comfortable to have the right conversation, and they feel empowered to have the right conversation. So, you have to create a structure for your environment and your culture to give them kind of that authority and the autonomy to work within your contact center, to have these discussions, to have that personalization. And then
Mhm.
obviously we want to make sure that we're empowering them in the way that we're leveraging our data correctly, where they have all the right tools available to themselves. I mentioned dashboards just a minute ago, right? Information, knowledge, and whatnot that ultimately gets them set up to be in a situation to where providing all these tools is great, having all the data is great, but you gotta still have to have somebody there to communicate and speak to people and have a carry on a conversation. So for us, it's just putting people in positions that we feel like they can be the most successful at the end of the day. Making sure that we as an employer has put our frontline worker in a position for success, whether that's via the technology and the tools that we have to offer, the data, and then the soft skills that need to go into a conversation as well are equally as important. And you do all those things, and then now they feel empowered. Now they feel like they have some authority and some autonomy of going into these conversations and know how to navigate them appropriately to get to the right answer, or the best outcome essentially for whom they're speaking with. So that's kind of how I view it and look at it. And I think those are things, and those little three buckets are things that we look at when we talk about implementation of new technology, whether it's a dashboard, workforce management, quality product, you name it. Is how is that going to enhance our frontline staff? Does that empower them? Does that enable them at the end of the day?
Yeah, and to tag on that real quick is that this what Scott and our entire team did really really well was the simplicity of the execution. So this was a hard cutover for us,
Mm.
and instead of phasing it by certain work groups or whatever it may be, and that was really important. In doing so, exposing people and looking for feedback in you know, not just with frontline team members, but our management team around how much and how little do we want to change at once. I think that was pretty important because that first impression of any type of technology sticks with people. So we wanted to make it positive, because that autonomy and authority is great, but people don't, if they get a bad taste immediately, that's kind of make it difficult to work with on an ongoing basis.
Makes a
Makes
lot of sense. So you're throwing a lot of technology at these people in order for that to be absorbable and positive in the way you have to have a lot of process around that, I assume. So how did you know how do you go about defining the processes, not just hey, we're going to do an integration with our CRM, or hey, we're going to do this, but how did you think through the agent's day to day, and then how did you review as you went along and fine tune? Because I'm sure the process you defined day one wasn't exactly the one you ended up with.
So this was actually an interesting exercise for us as an organization. So I'm going to be really humble and honest here. I think we had all the best intentions with all these processes that we were putting in place, and what we found was we were like death by 1,000 processes, is how I would and and what was happening was our frontline staff then was almost sitting on a call and thinking to themselves more about what process they needed to follow, rather than being
Mm,
natural in their selection of how
Mhm.
they were supposed to go into the phone call. So what ended up happening was us taking a look at all of our workflows, our processes, our procedures, and saying, do we really need this? Yes or no? Nope, let's cut it. Right. And then it was, how do we simplify this? Right. And really that when we started implementing our experience that we wanted to think, it turned into an exercise, Max, and doing it more around how do we simplify everything? Because the simpler we can make our day to day, then the more natural we found our frontline workers would be on a call because they were no longer thinking about all the little micro processes that they needed to worry about. It was more about my focus is on the patient, my focus is on the customer, my focus is on listening, active listening in regards. It's one thing to listen, it's another thing to active listen on a phone call. And, we found ourselves going through. So if the process was making things more challenging at the end of the day for our frontline workers, we needed to revisit. So to your point, we started off with a lot of great processes that looked great on paper, and my little methodical head, it seemed to just going to be perfect, and all of a sudden, and then the reality was it didn't work that same way, and we needed to really reevaluate those things as we went through day in day out. So that's kind of a high level synopsis of how we went about it, but that it's kind of where we found ourselves.
And I love that because we always focus on making it easier for the customer, making the customer's experience effortless. But it really is making that agent's experience effortless and easier as well. And I think that that's really important to highlight and underline here is that piece as a takeaway.
Yeah. And I think Wes, I don't know if you want to talk for a second.
Well, so I think the other thing that came out of this entire project is, do we need all the technology? Do we have the other, complementary technology to like a Ring Central application? What are some things within phase one or initial rollout that we didn't take advantage of that we can today? Is the redundancy in other pieces of technology we use in our business? And I think that's something that Scott and I, we have been working on over the last 90 days to kind of execute on some of that as well. Because, platforms, there's a reason why we call them that, they're more encompassing than point solutions or whatever you want to whatever the alternative may be. And that's something that we're going to continuously do, because our team and what we're asking them to do day in day out is it's a little bit more sophisticated. It's very dynamic, and it's unique to different health systems across the United States. And so they have different technologies and portals and things of that nature, and their communities that they serve and we help serve are all different.
I'm going to throw out a stat just completely out of the blue on you guys a little bit here. The average contact center manages 20 vendor relationships. I'm kind of curious if that seems around what you have or fewer or what. It's kind of a hard number to even get your head around because you have to stop and really think about all the different areas where it comes up. But kind of curious if you would if I ask you that, around how many vendors are you guys managing for the contact center?
As it directly relates to the contact center, I think in this process, well, if I look at the old world, we definitely had a lot more vendors involved and whatnot, because there was a lot more pieces that tied into it all. And I think transitioning to the cloud, and then for our perspective, leveraging things that were already part of the platform, enhancements to into that platform limits the vendor sprawl, I guess,
Right.
as you might be alluding to there. So I would take it down to probably maybe 2 or 3 now is where we're at in our contact center.
Wow.
I would say before we were probably closer to 10 to 12, maybe a little higher. I'm probably leaving a couple out off the top of my head, but yeah.
Interesting. So, last question I have for you for today. So, thinking of your staircase to customer experience nirvana, what's the next step? Where are you headed next on that staircase?
Yeah. So for that, it's a couple areas. So I think for Wesley and I, when we think in the future, so we play in the healthcare space, right?
Mhm.
And so a
Mhm.
lot of how we view contact centers comes through a lens of healthcare for us, and we look and we sit at the back end of your healthcare experience in our business. So we're dealing, we're I almost call us like the cleanup crew. Like, it's almost like you've gone through the patient journey and experience. You scheduled, you went and had services, you probably had some follow-up, and now like the cleanup piece comes at the back end, where it's like, all right, insurance comes in, then you got a balance you owe, and now you're confused about your healthcare bill. And so where I'm going with this is I think for us is, how do we simplify that experience when it comes around healthcare billing? And it's twofold. So for us, it's how we leverage data and information more effectively. You're going to always hear Wesley and I talk about that. That's something him and I are very passionate about. So there are ways for us to not only just get the general things about screen pop and, here's what the last interaction looked like, from a guarantor or a patient, but switching it into a more predictive model from our data perspective. But then how do you translate that predictive model into an actionable model that your frontline staff know what to do with that, meaning? So there's a lot of characteristics and things in healthcare that we can predict based off previous interactions, that we can have a better conversation with somebody in the future. And I think for us, our next kind of stair step is how we enhance that next interaction through a predictive model, in the contact center. So that's really important for us, and I think that's something that Wesley and I are one of the many things that we're noodling around in our day to day. So.
Awesome.
Great. I, you know, I'm going to take a stab at summarizing some of what we've talked about here today, and then Joanna, maybe you can kind of close us out and hand off to Scott and Wes for any final thoughts. I kept hearing simplify, simplifying for the agents, simplifying for and simplifying for you guys in terms of how you're managing the system, the vendors you're working with, etc. Uh, the importance of phases, small steps, being interactive. Uh, Joanna always talks about failing fast, trying something, failing fast. It seems like that resonates with you guys' approach to stuff, is putting it out there, seeing how it works, and making things as actionable as possible. I think those were three themes I pulled out of today's discussion. And Joanna, I don't know what you heard that may be different than that or beyond that.
Yeah, those are definitely the key themes. I think change management is also
Mm,
a large theme here, ensuring that you're bringing the entire organization along, keeping them engaged during this journey up the stairs.
yeah,
Scott
I agree.
Wesley, any closing thoughts?
I mean, I think what Scott just said is, our business and what we do in healthcare is pretty difficult on the end of it. Generally speaking, the healthcare journey is not always a very positive one, and it can be ongoing. And there's a lot of legislation that encompasses billing and things of that nature. That being said, if executing and providing our frontline team what they need to be a little bit more confident, and more present, when we have conversations with patients, that's pretty much one of the most key ingredients to success, because each one of those conversations is going to stick with that person. They're going to bring it back to a provider, back to a network, and that can not necessarily totally alter their vision, but paying and the ability to afford healthcare services, a lot of that confidence level comes with that conversation around what to expect when you do get to that point. with a provider. And I think that's what's really important. So our team's ability to kind of be there and not really be able to look somebody, in the eyes and make sure that they understand what's going on and what they're looking at, be it a bill or understanding, financial assistance or, their insurance coverage. Those are really critical things, but it's very difficult to do when you have a complex workflow and you're juggling a bunch of different applications. So that simplicity is absolutely key. And I think that's kind of what Max already reiterated.
I'll just close with these basic things for us. When you're trying to deliver a personal customer experience, um, you need to really try to look at the end of the day, put yourself in the customer's shoes. What are they trying to accomplish? What are they trying to go through and do? And, I think you need to always take that moment and step back and think about what you're doing today, but really, really take the approach and dig into what is possible in the future and where there's opportunities for enhancement and your workflow and what you're really trying to deliver at the end of the day to your customers. And then you're going to learn through that process at the end of the day, right? And I think it's okay to fail quickly, Joanna, as you always like to remind us on these. And I think that's a really powerful lesson for all of us to learn is it's okay to fail quickly. And to learn from those and pivot and move forward. And then I think the biggest thing that any contact center should really be doing is they need to solicit feedback. I see a lot of contact centers. There's a supervisor, call center manager, director, some executive guy, gal sitting up there, making decisions, but they never really solicit feedback from frontline staff and workers. And I think, if you're going to implement a new experience, well, you need to also get what that experience sounds and feels like from your frontline staff's perspective. And you need to solicit that feedback in a meaningful way. And go because then at the end of the day your agents can relate to your customers and how they're relating to them on this new experience that you're trying to create in your call center, your contact center is only going to get better once you realize what's really happening on those calls at the end of the day. So again, keep things simple, take stair step iterative approaches towards implementation, but you can do that and still think big at the end of the day.
Awesome.
Perfect note to end on. Thanks, everybody. And we will talk to you next time, coming up soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.